Hello to the two people watching this video. I am going to be showing how I edit pictures in Lightroom. So I've decided to do one indoor photo, one close-up, and one outdoor photo. So first I'm going to start with the indoor photo. The first thing I like to do is bring up the contrast, but as you can see it makes it darker around the edges and even on her face. So I'm going to bring up the exposure a bit too. What the exposure does is it brings up the highlights of her face, makes them pretty bright. So I'm going to take down the highlights as well, just to give more of an even look. Since this picture was taken inside and I couldn't really control the natural lighting and it was lights from the ceiling and lamps and things like that, now that this picture, it looks a little lifeless, and so something I like to do is bring up the temperature and the contrast up a smidge more. Another thing that I'm going to do with this picture is bring the blacks down but the shadows up, and then bring up the exposure a bit more as well, just so it doesn't look too dark in the back. I'm going to adjust the whites so that her face looks more even, same with the highlights. And I like the look of this picture, so the last thing I'm going to do is just straighten out the edges. Something that makes pictures look a lot more professional but is really simple to do is to just straighten them. So I'm going to take this tool right here, the ruler, and just draw along this line of the frame and straighten it like that. That is the final touch of this picture. And there wasn't really much to do, as you can see the before and after. It just looks a little bit more vibrant and brighter. The next picture I'm going to work with is a close-up. This picture was taken on a pretty cloudy day, and so the lighting is fairly even. But I'm just going to bring up the contrast and bring down the saturation. Those are the first two steps I always do on my pictures. They always make the picture look a little bit better, even with nothing else. Next thing I'm going to do is bring up that exposure, because this plastic that we used kind of looks like a wedding veil. So I'm going to bring that effect more, make it a little more dreamy like. And then I'm going to bring up the temperature, just to make it look like it wasn't taken on such a cloudy day. It was taken on more of a sunny, bright day. Going to bring down the highlights just to even her face out a bit, and then bring down the blacks just to add more definition to her face. I'm going to bring up the contrast a little bit more, bring up the exposure a little bit more, and then warming up the picture a little bit more. Another thing I'm going to do is bring down the shadows just to give more of a depth to this picture. Last thing I'm going to do is bring up the exposure just a tad more, and then the whites down a little bit. So this is the before and after of the close-up. As you can see, I just brightened it, gave it more of a dreamy feel because I feel like that goes along with the picture. Now I'm going to edit a picture that was taken outdoors. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring up the contrast and then bring down the saturation a little bit. His shirt is like a satin, and so it definitely reflects the light. So I'm just going to bring the highlights down a little bit more, just so you can see more of the detailing in his shirt. Next, I'm going to bring down the shadows just to give more definition to the background and his shirt. Before I do anything else, I'm going to straighten the photo by taking the ruler tool and drawing along this little brick fence. Next, to make this look like it was more sunny, I'm going to bring up the temperature just to give it that warm feel. Now, as you can see, this picture has a lot of greens and pinks, so I kind of want the pinks to stand out more than the greens. So I'm going to use the color saturation tool in Lightroom. I'm going to bring down the level of the green, not all the way, just a little bit, and then bring up the magenta, not all the way, but just a little bit. So you can see if I brought it up all the way, it would just look distorted. And then I think I'll bring up the reds as well, because this flower up here in the forefront, is a little more red undertoned. So that is the finished version of this, as you can see before and after. So lastly, now that you see the edited pictures, I'm going to show you just all of the tools that I keep open on the side that I like to utilize the most. So I like to keep the basic one open, which has all of just the basic editing, the warmth, the temperature, exposure, saturation. I don't really use the tone curve, so I keep that one closed. For this HSL or color, I keep the HSL open and I put it on saturation, which helps me adjust the amount of a certain color that I use. I don't use split toning, so I keep that closed. Detail, sometimes I use detail, sometimes I sharpen a picture, but that's not too often, but I do keep it open. Lens correction, I don't use this. Transform, I don't use this either. Effects, sometimes I use effects, like if I have a picture that's kind of a vintage feel, I'll bump up the grain just to make it kind of look like a film picture. And then calibration, I keep that closed. So those are the basic menus that I use while editing pictures. If you liked this video, just give it a like or comment, or if you have any more photography questions, leave them down below, and I hope this helped. Just a little beginner's guide, nothing too advanced, definitely not professional, but I hope if you're watching this, you enjoyed. And yeah, thank you for watching.